welcome back, and welcome to a very special session of the Exhibit Columbus Symposium, Foundations and Futures. This is a session that we called Innovation Through Design, and I'm really excited and proud to have this as part of the symposium. One of the things we want Exhibit Columbus to do is to become a platform for other projects to be showcased. And so this is a way for us to showcase things that are happening in the community around design, fabrication, and innovation that relate to education. So I'm really honored to have some guests here today. And so to introduce the guests, I'm going to bring up Exhibit Columbus team member Erin Hetrick, who is coordinator of educational projects for us. And so Erin is going to come up and lead a session with a number of guests: Crough, Clarissa Cook, Bill Jensen, Josh Giebel, and some of his students that are here today. I'm really excited about that. So I'd like to welcome Erin.
There are a number of designers and architects in the audience, and so I think that it's important to start the session by letting you know that I am not a designer or an architect. I claim to be an educator, and that's not to say that those two, you can't be both, but it's important to know that I have no formal training in design and architecture, and neither do the folks who are about to speak today. So what is an educator? What this means is that down to my core, what excites me and inspires me, and I would venture to guess what inspires the folks on this stage, is that we love to witness people, old or young, absorbing new knowledge and using that to change who they are, change something about them in some way. So educators all over, no matter what the topic, value knowledge and its capacity to transform a person. And the topic of the moment right now in education, particularly in public schools, is how better to provide the right knowledge and skills to students that will be meaningful to them in their adult lives. How can we help them become lifelong learners in a world that's more connected than ever and changing more rapidly than many of us can keep up with? How do we prepare students to learn, communicate, collaborate, and problem solve in the 21st century, but also provide for them a sense of place where they feel rooted as their world expands? We are here today, all of us, because educators, despite most of us not having formal training in design, are taking a good, hard look at design as a means of preparing our students for the future. You have heard a lot about Columbus and their school buildings these past 2 days. You know that the Cummins architecture program was based on the premise that designing great schools would inspire great education. So it probably won't surprise you to hear that the Bartholomew Consolidated School Corporation has been recognized nationally and internationally as leaders in this gradual movement of incorporating design in K-12 education. But at the same time, they have embraced the architectural legacy of Columbus, and using design, they have also woven in experiences that show students ways to celebrate their place and their city. The hope in presenting a comprehensive look at how BCSC incorporates design and architecture into their education system is meant to show that there are a number of pathways to bring design into the schools and prepare students around the country for the future. Using the examples that you are about to hear, because this doesn't have to take place only in Columbus, I invite you as designers and community leaders to consider how you or your colleagues may collaborate in your own community to bring design into education and design for education. In our session, you will hear from Crough, former executive director of the School Foundation, and he'll talk a little bit about how schools are working with design in the community and fostering appreciation for good design. Next will be Clarissa Cook, teacher at Columbus Signature Academy, Lincoln Elementary School. on how design and architecture concepts have been integrated into the 3rd and 4th grade classrooms. Bill Jensen, Director of Secondary Administration, will share how the school corporation uses design to support collaborative learning. And Joshua Giebel, teacher at the Columbus Signature Academy New Tech High School, will introduce us to how the design process is incorporated into the fabric of an entire high school's mission. High school students from the Columbus Signature Academy will share with you examples of work that illustrate how their innovative type of learning connects kids to each other, to the real world, and their community.
Okay, my name is Ethan Crough. First of all, I'd like to thank Erin, I'd like to thank Richard, I'd like to thank Landmark Columbus for making me a part of this event and putting design with education at the forefront of our community. I'd also like to thank you all for putting design back in the forefront of our community. I think Columbus is really thankful and grateful, and will be grateful in the future for Exhibit Columbus to be here. That being said, my name is Ethan, and I'm the former director of the school foundation. So a school foundation operates within a public school corporation. We're the nonprofit arm of a school corporation. So we take private donations, private funding for different projects, different initiatives, different things that the school corporation cannot necessarily fund based on state regulations, funding requirements, formulas, things like that. So the school foundation is a little bit more independent and has a little bit more agility when it comes to spending. So that's what I did for the last 4 years. As I was there, I want you to think about this. I want you to think about your community. If you're from Columbus, think about this place. If you're from someplace else, think about what's there and what makes your community unique, what makes your community special. I'm a relative newcomer to this community. I've been here for the last 6 years. And so as I got here, I noticed that Columbus cared a great deal about itself and was really proud of what our heritage was. And I started asking around from the school foundation leadership position, what could the school foundation help fund? What's missing? What's a piece that's not there? And as I started talking to people who had grown up in Columbus, the story I started hearing over and over again was, well, Ethan, I grew up in Columbus. I graduated high school, thankfully, and I moved on to some other location, and someone would say, where are you from? And that person would say, the person speaking would say, well, I'm from Columbus, Indiana. And the stranger that they had just met would say, oh, let me show you a book I have about Columbus, Indiana. And they would run over, and the person who was from here would be a little bit dumbstruck, a little bit awestruck, a little bit just confused. Well, why do you have a book about Columbus? And then sometimes they had more than one book. Sometimes they had several. Sometimes they had an entire shelf. Or the person would comment to the Columbus resident that you might not know what you have from your town because they were so familiar with the design of our community. So when I discovered that, I reached out to our community members, which is something Erin just talked about. In your community, if you're an architect, if you're a designer, think about who you can reach out to in terms of collaborating with. Go where the energy is. And so I reached out into our community, and I found some very willing participants who said, let's see what we can do around design. And we came up with the idea of partnering with the Visitor Center here in Columbus. We also partnered with Kids Commons, which is the local children's museum. They had just put a new exhibit in called City by Design. And so we partnered with them. So we had 3 community partners with the school foundation, the visitor center, and the museum to create a 3rd grade program for young students to come downtown to learn about their community. The visitor center had done this previously, several years earlier, and had pushed it into the schools, but the funding had sort of dried up for those schools to continue doing that. We have 11 elementary schools in BCSC. So to get every elementary school downtown, every 3rd grade class downtown was challenging. But the school foundation partnered with the Heritage Fund, the community foundation of Bartholomew County, and received a grant from them to help support the program for the initial 2 years. We received a matching grant so that we could split the cost. And so what we ended up doing was we took kiddos downtown on a 3rd grade tour. That's me, because I'm really shy and introverted, and I have no ability to speak out loud to children. And so we ended up telling them not the architectural details of Columbus, but the story of their community. Because in 3rd grade, they're not worried about state, they're not worried about national. Their 3rd grade curriculum says that they need to learn about community. And so we took this opportunity to come downtown. We start at the Irwin Mansion across the street, and we say, hey, did you know that there was a really wealthy gentleman who lived here with a family that continued to live in Columbus? And one of the drivers that this guy hired was named Clessy. And they all look at me like, oh, well, does anyone know Clessy's last name? And these 3rd graders look, no, I don't know. And then you say, well, it was Cummins. And they all look and their eyes get wide. And they go, oh, I know that name. And then you joke with them, why do you know that? What? You don't know that name. And they do, because of Cummins and all the different people who in this community who have cared very deeply about design. So you start them on this path. You start them on this journey that says your community is special and this is why. And you take them from a very old building with the Irwin Mansion, and you walk them through a chronological history. You stop at Lincoln Elementary, you show them a school, you show them a church, you show them a library, you go down the street, you show them a bank. And I think the best part is, because we were showing them all these buildings that have been built years and years ago. I mean, this church is, around 75 years old? It doesn't look it, but it is. You get all the way downtown to where the Commons is, across from Kids Commons. And what you may not realize and what you can take home with you about educating your community about its special place in the world is that when we get downtown to the Commons, we talk about all the old things that have happened or the things that happened a long time ago for a 3rd grader. And then you point to the Lucky Climber, and they look at the Lucky Climber, and I ask them, I say, well, how much does it cost you to go on that Lucky Climber? And they all look at me and they say, it costs nothing, it's free. And if you look at, statistically, at Lucky Climbers, designed by the artist Tom Lucky, right? All across the world, they're paid for. You have to pay to go to them. But Columbus still cares very deeply about its community, still cares very deeply about its youth. So that when they put the Commons in, they put a really outstanding piece of design in there for children. So that children, because they're the future of our communities, still have this great appreciation for good design. So think about that as you leave, as you walk through your community or walk through this community, what a community can do for itself in terms of educating its youth. And so the 3rd grade tour is now in its 3rd year. We successfully funded it for 2 years with the Heritage Fund. And now the school foundation is going to pay for the entire program itself. So we take the kids downtown, we show them their community. We take all the schools, all the outlying schools as well. We take the ones in town as well. And we take them downtown, we show them their community buildings. We show them, tell them their community story, and then we take them to Kids Commons so they get to be an architect. Because the City by Design exhibit is meant for children to be architects. They get to look at blueprints, they get to look at elevation, they get to look at all these great things. So that's something we're really proud of with the school foundation, and we think that can be brought into other communities as well. We were also, as you look into design of the future or future programming, you can also look for partnerships. So one of the things we partnered with was an artist, Ben Hill and Kelly Wilson. Kelly Wilson you may or may not have met already, but he's with IU CAD, and Ben Hill is a local artist. We partnered with them to create what Bill and some other teachers might talk about with this universal design for learning concept, is that we created a comic book about young designers, showing that children can have these design superpowers, if you will, for being able to figure out different aspects of what design looks like, different aspects of what cool things are. You know, they'll talk about one of the projects in a minute or two, but they will envision what cities look like. And one of one of the coolest things we do, so there are going to be copies of Young Designers right over there on that large stand where the photographer, Tad, is standing. So if you want to take a copy with you before you leave, please do. But one of the coolest things, and the thing I'll close with, is that while we're on this tour over at CSA Lincoln, I tell the kids, I say, I'm gonna leave you with a very cool term for a hill, or a very significant architectural term for a hill. And I run up that little hill that's on the outside of CSA Lincoln, and I say, does anyone know what this is? And they all look at me like, I don't know. And then, all I tell them is it's a berm. And so the idea being that when you design something, you don't just have to design a building. You can design landscape, you can design parks, you can design a microphone that someone holds. Design is everywhere. And so their community is full of it, and that's what we try and leave them with. So that's what the School Foundation does. And we're proud to be a part of all of this that's happening with Columbus. Thank you. And I just saw the slide behind me. So I would like to now introduce Clarissa Cook, who is currently a 6th grade teacher at that wonderful school I just spoke about, CSA Lincoln, and she'll tell you a little bit more about those projects. Thank you.
Thanks, Ethan, and thanks for having me today. I'm here today to talk about an ongoing project that started 2 years ago at our school. And it started with an architectural tour actually coming through our building one day. And the students, they're familiar with people coming through our building, but they turned to me and they said, why is it that people are always walking through our building? What is it that makes this a unique place? What are they doing? So this turned into several conversations of, well, the design of our building is unique and special, and so is Columbus. That's why you see people coming here all of the time. So this then led to our 3rd and 4th grade teacher team looking for a local artist, somebody who could we work with who would be engaged with our students and help them understand this process. And at that point, we reached out and contacted Kelly Wilson and Marlene Newman. And they came in and we talked about what could a project look like that would inspire the students to learn about this passion of art and design in Columbus and continue that on rather than them moving on and never getting that piece of why it is that people come here all of the time. So we talked and we met, and Kelly and Marlene then came to the school, and they presented to the students concepts and components of a city, and specifically our city of Columbus and how unique it is and what makes up a city. And Kelly presented a city grid to them and asked them, what is it that makes up a city? What does a city need? And so the students started sharing, well, they need jobs and people and land and business. And so they shared these pieces, and then we started looking at where could these things go in a city? Where would they be located? And so it then drove conversations and work of, well, let's make up this city, let's make up our own city. And so Kelly and Marlene and a group from IUCAD then came to the school for the next several weeks. And the students split up into teams, and they started working on their ideal city and what that looked like. And they set it up on a large grid we had outside in our school hallway. And the students worked in groups, and they set up their piece of the grid. And you can see part of it up here, their sections. And from that point, it was, well, how can we share this with those in Columbus? Where could we house this that would continue those conversations of art and design? And so they met with Kelly, and they met with the mayor at the time, and they talked to them about, well, what about Friendship Alley? Somewhere where people here go to fellowship with one another, walking downtown, centrally located. Where could they see this? And so you'll see here our event, our final culminating event, where the students then got to see their city grids hung on steel grates downtown, which was quite a feat. We then had to work with, well, waterproof, how are we going to keep this here and keep it stabilized through the year. And when we finished and wrapped up this first round of our project, we then moved on to, well, what's it going to be next? You know, the students, you could tell that there was a change of heart and a change of interest. And, well, could we do this again? Could we do something else? Could we add to this? And so we then met and talked about, what about taking this idea of a design that we've made in 2 dimensions and expand that out to a design in that's 3-dimensional with the students. So we met the following year, and there they are having their conversation with one another. We met the following year, or this past year, our 3rd and 4th grade team again with Kelly and Marlene, and they had actually just finished up a project where they had used recycled materials and bottles to fashion, well, you can see here, to fashion design pieces that they were showing to their students. So we talked about what could that look like as far as a sculpture or a piece of architecture that the students could make that they could move through and walk through, that could show a city or something to them. And so you see here a photo of a student at the studio, and they were drawing what this could look like out of bottles that we could recycle and kind of serve 2 purposes with that. So following that, Kelly and Marlene then came back to the school, and we talked about, okay, we here in Columbus, we see a lot of tours, we see a lot of cultures that are coming in, and what is something that we see in other cultures that's value to them and important to them, and that's shared. And so this kind of inspired an idea of a wishing sculpture of sorts, where their dreams can come true and where they can design something that they see a common across cultures. So you see the students here working at the IUCAD Design Studio, and what they decided on was a wishing forest, where we then reached out with paper slips that we spread out to the school and to the community, and to other schools and students of, may your wishes come true, and maybe you don't want others to see your wishes, and so some students closed theirs. And we handed out several different colors that could represent the trees and the river and you know, it flowing through. So the students got together with Kelly and Marlene, and they fashioned 3 different size trees and sculptures. And then their water was running through the middle of it. And from here, we ended up housing this over at City Hall. So they had a meeting with the mayor and Kelly and some of our project managers from the school, some of our 3rd and 4th graders. And we presented the idea to the mayor of, let this continue to inspire and promote within young students and adults that we care about this and we are passionate about this and we want to continue to see this grow. And so for at least a month or so, it was able to be housed at City Hall at the end of the school year last year. And talking with the mayor afterward, I guess it did incite and spark some conversations of, what is this that's down here, as people walked in to have meetings or for various reasons. And so you could just see them light up over, this is something that we've done and we care about, and we know that Columbus is passionate about this and we want to continue that. So there's our meeting, and we carrying over our sculptures separately, or our designs separately, was also quite a feat. We had some broken bottles that we had to refashion and put together. And then this is what they got to come and see the final product of it put together. So you can see the river running through and carrying their wishes to come true. So this is something that our school, our students continue to promote and talk with their parents and talk with their friends in our district. and in something that we want to continue to grow and enrich for them. So we're pleased to see what our next steps are going to be with this. So thank you.
I'm going to be talking about design in the learning environment from an educator's perspective. That's interesting. There we go. I bet I'm going to be the first person over these 2 days that are going to be talking about Pink Floyd. It's 1980, my senior year at Purdue in education. And this album comes out. And this is the cover of the album. And the song, Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, is on the radio all the time. And it just resonates with me. Because as Pink Floyd tells a story about how they view education. No thought control, no dark sarcasm in the classroom. After all, you're just another brick in the wall. I was not going to be that teacher. I was also very fortunate that from very on, as a third-generation educator, my mother taught me about individual student variability from day one when I was little. Every student is different. Every student learns differently at different rates, has their own passions, interests, abilities, and talents. And it's your job as a teacher to discover those talents, to let those students discover those talents, those hidden talents and abilities and talents that they have, and bring those out. As I looked at this album and thought about that, that was my challenge. To make sure as a teacher I did that. And so I started looking at systems and looking at bad design. Okay, I'm not sure how well you can see this, but we use this cartoon a lot with the visitors coming in. This is an example of bad design. Here this person saying, okay, for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. And yet, isn't that what we do today with standardized testing? Albert Einstein's quote there is like, oh, everybody's a genius, but if you judge fish by the ability to climb a tree, it'll live its whole life believing that it's stupid. It's like my mother was channeling Albert Einstein. How great was that? So how much talent have we lost because of this? How much talent have we not discovered because of a one-size-fits-all exam? Bad design. And to think about schools are judged by this, teachers are judged by this, and more importantly, what's so wrong about this is students are judged by this. So think about your experiences. How familiar does that look? Pretty familiar, doesn't it? High school, college, we've seen that. And if there's not assigned a seating, guess where we sit? Kind of like church in the back, right? There we go. Isn't that our view we're used to? Creating this barrier between us and the teacher. We can sit back there and we can hide. How many of us have done that? Know what we have to do to pass that quiz, pass that test, and then dump that, a mind dump right away. We've all played, I guarantee you, everybody in here has played that game at some time or other. Bad design. This reminded me of my high school experience. Everybody sitting in rows, doing the same thing, listening to the teacher, maybe doing a worksheet, reading out of the book. Again, design that did not really engage student learning. So in the year 2000 or so, something really exciting starts happening in Napa, California. There's stuff going on in little pockets throughout the United States, but Napa, California, there's some very interesting things going on. This gentleman, Ted Fujimoto, I would call him an entrepreneur design genius. He goes to the Napa School Board and says, you know, you're doing okay producing bricks in the wall. But that's not going to help the workforce of the 21st century or the citizenship of the 21st century. So the Napa Valley School Board says, okay, help us design what a good school would look like. So Mr. Fujimoto and a group of educators, a group of business leaders, start doing research about various models of education that are out there, various design models of education that are out there. And they discover project-based learning. And you're going to hear more about project-based learning on our next speakers and hear from the students. But they discover project-based learning. And so what it does is, again, it's contextual learning. And they design a whole school, wall-to-wall project-based learning. And they get funding from the Gates Foundation along with some other businesses there in Napa Valley to fund the school. We were fortunate enough to go down there and visit this school, speak to Mr. Fujimoto, come back to Columbus. Of course, this being Columbus, saying, we can do that here, and we can do it even better. And so, as we start talking to the community about creating a school, a new tech school, we found the research that supported that. Lots of literary research supported the idea of project-based learning and what that school could look like. But more importantly, was the neuroscience behind project-based learning. Because for authentic learning to happen, not just getting prepared for that quiz or that test and then doing a mind dump because it really doesn't stay with you, you've got to engage 3 networks of the brain. The first one, the most important one, is the affective network of the brain. This is the why of learning. Why is this important to me? What am I going to do with this information? What's the relevance of this? What are the connections to what I know in the real world? The brain searches for this. The brain looks for those connections, those patterns, the why of learning. The what of learning, this is the perception network you have. Think of this as all your senses. How you perceive all the data, stimulus, and information that's around you. How you process that. And we all process it in different ways. We all perceive it in different ways. Then the strategic network, the how of learning. What do you do with that information? How could the executive functioning, that's so important, about being strategic and goal-directed. So you have to create an environment that engages all 3 brain networks. So what's this look like? Designing and learning classrooms where you can't hide. As simple as that, changing the seating arrangements. Allowing students to collaborate. Bringing in community members to connect what's happening in the classroom to the outside world. Designing learning spaces that look like 21st century workplaces, that are authentic. We have had over 4,000 visitors in 8 years we've had the Columbus Signature Academies. 4,000 visitors from 37 different states. And this is what we're proud to show them. That learning looks meaningful to me. I love this picture because at Lincoln CSA, what you have are students doing town meetings. They're passing the microphone. They are running the meetings. It's a powerful learning experience. Students engaged. Students, again, collaborating and learning together. So to summarize, learning environments have got to be able to address individual student variability. It's critical. Learning environments have to allow discovery. not only of the real world, but discovery of your own talents and abilities so you can bring those out. The curriculum, instruction, and assessments have to be accessible to all students. I'll close with this cartoon. If you shovel the ramp, all students can get into the building. Providing options for the marginalized student creates opportunity for all students. So we don't have just another brick in the wall. Thank you very much. Now I'm pleased to turn it over to one of our rock star teacher facilitators at CSA New Tech, Mr. Josh Giebel, and his students.
Good afternoon. I want to start out by asking you to think about the best experience you had in your schooling. How many of you thought about something that happened between K-12? Not a whole lot of hands go up. How many of you would say that your best experience came in a core class like math, science, history, or English? A couple of you. I'm here today to talk a little bit about my school story, my personal school story, as well as a school story for the people that I get to teach every day. Our school story, for most of us, dealt with books, lectures, notes. Maybe if we were lucky, we got to do a trifold poster and present to what turned out to be mostly our parents and the parents of the people in our class. And that was exciting because it was something different than taking a test at the end of the project. Imagine replacing those trifolds with an opportunity to create an exhibit for a local community museum that people actually come to, pay money for, and then get to see. Or better yet, imagine replacing that report on clean energy use with the opportunity to build and test and install clean, reusable energy at a local community spot. Our students get to do that at our school. Columbus Signature Academy started in 2008 as a revolutionary pathway for education. We are now a nationwide demonstration for project-based learning implementation and best practices. We host a regional project-based learning professional development that happens every summer. And we're also home to many award-winning projects that have been recognized nationwide. So what exactly is project-based learning? Buck Institute defines project-based learning as a teaching method in which students gain knowledge and skills by working for an extended period of time to investigate and respond to engaging and complex questions, problems, or challenges. So how is that different than the projects we did in high school? I mean, I think we all probably had that experience where we got to do a project or the teacher asked us to do a project. Those all started with us learning all of the content first. So we went through our lectures, we went through and we did homework and we researched and we had quizzes and maybe we had labs and activities. And then at the end they said, okay, now that you know all of this material, go out and create a trifold poster. Or go out and create something, or create a speech, or do a research report. Or maybe if we were lucky, we got to build something because we had some time at the end, or we had a parent who said, hey, why don't you do this instead of just that boring trifold poster? Well, project-based learning isn't that. Project-based learning actually, I think, is the opposite of that. So rather than waiting until the end, after we've learned all the material, to do a project, we say, okay, I'm gonna give you a problem. I'm gonna give you a project right from the get-go. I'm gonna say, instead of learning about clean, reusable energy, I'm gonna say we need clean, reusable energy at this space, and then we're gonna use that to drive all of the learning that happens. So rather than starting with all of the content, we're starting with the real problem, because that's the way it works in the real life. We don't just start learning a bunch of stuff and then say, okay, what can I do with all this stuff I learned? There's a need, there's a community, there's a need in the community, there's a need in our occupation, and we say, okay, we need to figure out how to solve this, and then we learn it. So project-based learning is that. We come up with a project, we come up with a problem that our kids can solve, then we ask them to solve it. And then along the way, they ask us questions and we provide the answers. Conveniently, that happened to be what we need to teach our students in our core areas. So I'm gonna actually think about why this is so important. And this pains me a little bit as a teacher to say, but all of the math stuff that I teach every day, it really isn't all that important for most people as they go on in their lives. And you guys, you can't listen to this because it is, as far as I know. But the reality is, the Pythagorean theorem, no one's going to really use it all that often every day. Or maybe, you know, we use it, but we have a computer calculate it, so I no longer have to do it by hand. What we need is thinkers who can collaborate, who can problem solve, who can communicate those things, and then who can think creatively to turn something that's, you know, not working functionally into something that is innovative and helps move the future forward. So I'm going to share a project with you and kind of talk about some of the things that we do on a daily basis that hopefully engage our students a little bit more than maybe the traditional lecture. So the Don't Lean on Me project we did last year in an integrated geometry and introduction to engineering design course. It has about 45 students per class with 2 certified teachers, 1 math and 1 engineering. And in that project, we covered the geometry concepts of properties of arcs, circles, tangents, and engineering concepts, including reverse engineering, AutoCAD prototyping, and the design process. So a project starts with a project launch. So again, right off the bat, this is different. Rather than starting with, this is the property of an arc is defined by this, a tangent to a circle is important in finding the center to the circle, we start out saying, hey, we have a problem. And the problem our students faced was, we had chairs that were breaking, that the students sat in. The foot pads were breaking off the chairs. And if you can see in the corner, we have a little bit of an image in the chair. There's a nice, really clean, near circle at the bottom of that chair. So we took a video of that chair breaking and we said, all right, kids, these are breaking. We need to figure out a solution because eventually we'll run out of chairs, or we need to find a way to help this company produce chairs that don't break, because inevitably kids lean on chairs and these foot pads are breaking, and that can be a problem. So we say, here's the problem. And we start by asking them to identify the things that they know and they need to know. And right from the beginning, we've engaged them in the solution process. And now they're asking questions about how they solve the problem. And in that first day, they're probably not asking questions about arcs and tangents and circles, but eventually they're going to get there. And so the big thing that resonates with me every time we do a project in this course is that the design process, the one that we all use in an engineering course, really guides our work in a natural manner. What are we asking students to do? We're asking students to figure out how to solve a problem in a logical and natural manner. We're asking them to take ownership over a problem. We're asking them to solve something that's needed, and we're avoiding the question, and this is a question as a math teacher that I was afraid I'd get every day when I went through my student teaching. When are we ever going to use this? We don't have to worry about that because we're asking them to use it every single day. And so they know when they're going to use that concept. So the middle of the project comes, and they're doing things like generating concepts. They're coming up with ideas and sketches, and they're coming up with different designs for the footpad. And then they're going, well, how do we get it to fit on the chair? There's this arc thing going on, and I don't know exactly how to make it fit perfectly, because if it doesn't fit perfectly, then my design is useless. Well, that's where I get a smile and say, oh, hey, that kind of looks like a circle. What do we know about circles? And then we start investigating all of those math concepts that I'm asked to teach by the state, and I figure out a way to incorporate that into the project. And now instead of me going through a lecture where they're not listening to all of those, properties and theorems and ideas, they're saying, how do I find the center of the circle? I need to find the center of the circle. And I say, well, let's investigate that. Let's look at different ways we can find the center of a circle. And we're learning those same properties that we learned when we were in high school. And they're putting them to use, which is even better. So you can see some of the student work during this phase of the project. And this is my favorite phase, not just because I'm a math teacher and I get to teach the stuff that I love, but because this is where I really get to see students be curious about the content that I love. They're asking questions that I never got a chance to ask. I just had to, watch what my teacher said, write it down in a notebook, regurgitate it on a test, and move on. Students are asking questions that I don't even maybe know the answer to right away, and we have to investigate it together. So you can see the student work leads to some deep curiosity and deep thinking, and it's all owned by them. So this leads me to another aha moment. If you walk into our school, which many people get a chance to every day, And if you haven't had a chance to, we love having visitors come to our school, but it's not like a normal school. PBL is noisy. If you walk into our school, there's a buzz, and that's a good thing. I kind of get worried when my class is silent. It means they're not engaged. If you come into our classroom, kids are talking, they're problem solving, they're thinking, they're collaborating together. Learning doesn't happen in isolation. It happens when you're working with another person and you're thinking and you're bouncing ideas off of each other and you're sharing. That happens every day in our school. And it's what makes our students and our projects so successful. By the end of the project, students are usually telling me to stop bothering them. We're trying to finish our presentation. We need to get ready for this community partner who's coming in on Friday. And I'm sitting there going like, oh my gosh, what do I need to do to get them ready? But the reality is, I just need to sit back and let them come up with what they need to do to be successful. So our students were able to develop, design, print, and test different prototypes for the footpad, and then they had to present them to a panel of engineers. It's pretty cool. When you can say, as a sophomore or a freshman in high school, that you had an idea that you created for a real problem critiqued by people who are experts in the field. And maybe that's a little bit intimidating because, you know, as adults, we are genuinely curious and we ask questions that are pretty tough that maybe our students didn't think about, but the next time they do a project, they're thinking about those questions and they're answering those questions before they even get asked. So it's huge that PBL gets kids in front of adults. It's really important because we know from our experience in the professional world that one of the biggest things that we do is communicate with each other. And if we're not comfortable communicating with each other, then we're not in a position that we can really be successful. Our students probably do more presentations in the 4 years that they're at our high school than most adults do in their lives. They're talking in front of people all the time. And it's really exciting to see them all dressed up professionally and actually excited about these presentations. They may say they're nervous, but in the end, they're really excited. So at this point, I'd like to introduce the people who make me look good on a regular basis. We've got a few student groups here, so I'd like to present Alex Taylor and Taylor Figgins, who will be talking to you a little bit about a project we did in our Geo-IED class last year, where we got to reinvent some public spaces, as well as Toni Fisher, Addie Smith, and Jacqueline Cowan, who will talk a little bit about their wind turbine project and their physics and advanced physics class. Toni, Addie, and Jacqueline, it's my honor to present you. Good luck.
Welcome. Today we will be presenting to you the future of design education as done through the process of Columbus Signature Academy, New Tech Campus's Physics Windmill project. I'm Addie Smith, this is Toni Fisher, and this is Jacqueline Cowan.
So the overall goal of our project was to build a working windmill and display it on top of our school and tie it to the power grid and have students understand and gain skills that they would need to build a functioning windmill.
So to give you a little bit of a background, this project started in 2011 at CSA, where Advanced Physics and Honors Physics decided to construct and design a windmill that would be placed at CSA. They had not yet had the knowledge to place it at CSA. They had to learn still. So they put it in a place called Keeping Hill, where that was placed there and it helped generate power to the community there. So then in 2014, you can see that they decided to revisit that and redesign it to make sure it was better. They can make it produce more energy. That way they can be more beneficial to the community that was there. So then last year, in our physics class alone, we decided to go back to that project, reproduce the problem, and decide to construct one and design it that would be placed at CSA this year instead.
There were 3 major benchmarks or phases for this project. The first of which was to research information we needed before we could start construction. This included grant acquisitions, construction approvals, and material and structural studies. We also conducted a wind study to determine the location of the windmill and researched the equipment that we would need, such as the generator, brake system, and digital display. The second phase involved developing prototypes and final design selection. While the advanced physics students were working on planning and the execution of benchmarks, both advanced and first-year physics students were working on constructing the prototypes. The final phase is the actual construction and installation of the windmill. For this, we have and will be working with various community partners, such as Mr. Gratz's C4 welding class over at Columbus North High School, my bad.
So for our prototype construction, the first phase was creating parent prototypes. So students from both years of physics classes, both honors physics and advanced physics, paired up, and then they created a blade style that they wanted to use. So some people used a helix design or cups or shovels or whatever they could think of, and they built their prototype and then presented it to Mrs. Nowles, who is our physics teacher, and we're actually in the second year of this project right now.
So after those parent prototypes were created, we then went back and we decided that we wanted to take the best aspects from those and create a final prototype. So what we did is, since they were categorized into blade designs, we took those and we made groups of 4 or 5 students who then decided to revise. Here you can see the 3 finalists that were created.
Once they had seen all the super prototypes, they decided to look at what they thought were the best turbines and selected 3 design finalists from there. They also added an unplanned phase of development that involved completing a new version of those design finalists with the actual construction materials at a half scale. We have those design finalists with us here today. The one on your far left, this one, is the Darius windmill. The Darius windmill consists of an egg beater shape with the cross-section of the blade being an airfoil shape. The rotation is caused by the difference in pressure that is caused by the blade shape. The wind that flows on the outer side of the blade has a lower pressure than the wind that flows on the inner side of the blade, which causes lift. That lift is what causes the turbine to rotate. The Shovels windmill is the one that's on your guys' far right. The Shovels windmill consists of a helical design. The wind hits the cup surface of the blade, which causes the turbine to rotate. The helical design of the windmill also enables the turbine to keep spinning as the wind hits it from any direction. The Buckets windmill is the one in the middle of the 2. The Buckets windmill rotates using the same principles as the Shovels windmill. The only difference is that the blades are larger, offset by 30 degrees, and in groups of 3 as opposed to the helix orientation. This windmill also captures the wind in the circular blades. From this point on, only the advanced physics students are working on this project. We are currently in the phase of developing these 3 prototypes with the actual construction materials. We are also each representatives from each of these groups. Jackie is from the Darius windmill, Toni is from the Shovels windmill, and I'm from the Buckets windmill. For the Darius windmill, we have been working with Greg Strite from Cummins Tech Center to 3D print the blades. For the Buckets windmill, we have been working with Mr. Grass's C4 welding class at Columbus North High School and currently have most of the frame built. And for the Shovels windmill, we have been working with Oscar McCleary, who has offered to help us cast the blades. In fact, we are actually working with him to arrange a field trip where students can go and pour plastic into the molds before we do it with aluminum.
So as you heard Addie speak of all of these community partners that we're working with, we can see that we have a lot of people that we actually have talked to and communicated with. We've, as a class, as physics class and honors physics class, we've taken field trips to Benton County Wind Farm, Keeping Hill. Keeping Hill, since it's originally where it's at, we went there to look at the one that's currently there to learn observations and questions of how we can improve it upon when we take it to CSA itself. Also, we've been working with Paul Brumlevy, who is a structural engineer who came to CSA to present to us, and he told us advice he had for us when we go to place it at CSA, since we did have a hiccup before in previous years when we tried to place it at CSA. We also worked with Steve Forrester, who's BCSE Director of Maintenance, and he's trying to help make sure that we are able to get this at CSA. We want to make sure we can have something to show when we leave and have something that Columbus doesn't have in other surrounding counties at schools.
So our research throughout this project gave us the information we needed to purchase a generator, a digital display, and other electronic components. And we chose a generator that has 3 phases and provides alternating current because it has more copper coils, larger magnets, and produces less heat. And this generator was recommended to us by Missouri Wind, and they're a company that builds wind turbines.
Missouri Wind is one of our community partners and windmill experts, and they have also agreed to assist us with the installation of the turbine and connecting electronics to the turbine.
So we've recently contacted city planning. They said that the structure is fine as long as it doesn't surpass certain restrictions of the city. building height, so to make sure that we can get this on the roof, we want to make sure that at any cost possible, we do not surpass those restrictions because we want to make sure this happens. Also, Steve Forrester told us that if there are any cost problems whenever we go to install it, that he is willing to help us, which is a huge load off our shoulders.
So originally we had planned to use an anemometer to determine the best place on our school roof to place this wind turbine, but we met with structural engineers just to make sure that it would be okay, and we learned that we were restricted to certain sections of our building. So we shifted our focus from maximum energy production to the educational benefits of this project for the students. So this would include the value of renewable energy, electricity studies, and community engagement, working with community partners, and group dynamics.
So finally, we see that this is not only a project just at CSA, we're trying to make this involved to the community. We want to make sure we can see this when we leave high school. This is my senior year, so I've taken this project on personally as my senior project, and I'm going to see to it that there is a wind turbine on the roof of CSA when I leave. I want to drive by at the end of the year with my friends that I meet at college and say, I put that there. That's my work. I'm working with another fellow student at CSA as well. We're both pretty passionate about this, and we want to make sure that we can see to it that everything is completed and we can actually leave being proud of something that we've completed and not just saying, oh, I completed a senior project, I donated some stuff here. We want to make an impact, and not only that, we want to be able to benefit our school, the place that's helped educate us for 4 years to make us feel comfortable going into college. Not only that, but if in PBL we were able to learn the standards and going to help teach them in the honors classes, electricity, magnetism, power, energy, torque, and so much more we were able to learn from just one project. It's amazing to see how just one thing can able to tie into all of the education standards you need to have. So next, I would like to introduce Taylor Figgins and Alex Taylor to present their next project.
So, as previously mentioned, I am Taylor Figgins.
And I'm Alex Taylor.
And our project is the Engine Bridge project, which is the little black sculpture over there, where we built a water fountain out of engine parts, and we will explain how we did that. So how our project came to be is Exhibit Columbus came to us and wanted us to design an installation here in town that could be put primarily around the area that you're currently in, so downtown, that would be able to tell the story of Columbus. And it also had to fit our Introduction to Engineering and Geometry academic standards. And with this, we decided, like I said earlier, to build a water fountain out of engine parts. So the most of the way that this fit our project standards was our engineering design process, which first off, I know a lot of you probably know because you're architects and engineers and et cetera, but we define the problem, we give previous examples, like Toni previously mentioned in the presentation before us, solution criteria, we brainstorm ideas, we choose the best solution to build a prototype, and we test and possibly even redesign our prototypes. Our inspiration that we found for this was we went to the Cummins Technical Center here in town, and also the corporate office buildings where they have these sculptures hanging and showing and placed just for the community to see and the workers to see and get inspiration from.
So our original idea for this project is we wanted it to be 4 feet wide and 4 feet tall. We also wanted to be able to function with very little maintenance, as we know that whenever you put something outside as a piece of architecture, it creates a tin rust, especially with the metal that we have on here. So we wanted to be able to have as little maintenance as possible. We also wanted it to be mainly made out of engine parts because we are in a Cummins and manufacturer community. So on your left is the original prototype that we made that's sitting right there. On the top middle is the engine head, which was donated by Connie and Steve's, which is in Columbus, as well as the oil pan was donated by them, and the pistons was donated by a car shop in Seymour.
So our updated ideas, other than telling the story of how Columbus interacts with Cummins and the architecture and the art and the beauty around town, was we wanted to make it larger. As you can see, it's decently sized currently, but we wanted to make it between 6 and 8 feet tall and 4, maybe 4.5 foot wide. Yeah. We wanted it to be like this so that way we can have people interact with it rather than it being too big and kind of being in the way. People can come up to it and be like, oh, this is neat, this is cool, play around with it a little bit and have some fun. One of the ways we wanted people to be able to interact with it is we wanted to add music. I am a very large member of the Columbus North High School band here in town, and I know how people can interact with music on a daily basis, whether it be writing music, playing an instrument, listening to their favorite song, how music affects your emotions, how music can draw people into something. And we decided that in the future, if we were to continue with this project, would be to add xylophone panels on a wheel slide. That way you could pull either a string or a bungee cord back and forth, and as the water bounces off the pistons, would hit the top of the xylophone panels and ring out in a pitch. And when you pulled one of these, it would change the pitch, either making it higher or lower.
So first how this works is there's a miniature fountain pump inside the oil pan which holds the water, which would be as the water source of the whole entire pump. It first pumps in through the water line, through the engine head, which is what you see on the very top there. And then it falls through the pistons, and it actually makes a very nice kind of musical tone to a sound as it drops through. And after that, it would drop through the xylophone plates, goes back into the oil pan, and the process repeats. And whenever the water goes back into the oil pan, it creates a recycling process so that that water stays in there. And then whenever it rains, we would have flowers or some type of nature around there so that that nature would be watered so that the water just doesn't go to waste.
So here's a rough sketch of where the xylophone would be put into place. So as you can see, the large orange section is the oil head, and the smaller blue rectangles are the pistons. And the water would flow over the engine head and off the pins, in and off of the pistons and over the wheel slide, and each little bounce would be like a mallet ringing on the xylophones. It would tap it and it would kind of ring, and then it would tap it again and it would ring once again, and it would just kind of create kind of a rhythm that would be pretty consistent.
So we've been working on this project for over 8 months now. And we've learned many things about the design process, and that it's not just restricted to engineering and mechanics. We've also learned that art in our community is very influential. As living in this community, we get very used to seeing the art, and it kind of goes away. We also learned that there's a lot of steps to creating a piece of architecture, not just us, as whenever we see it, it just shows up. We learned that there's a design process that you have to go through builders and designers, and you have to get permits and all that stuff.
And throughout learning about the design process and everything we've been through it's not just what we learn in the classroom, it's kind of what we can learn from our own research and how we learn it rather than just how it fits into our standards.
I just really quickly wanted to thank Bill and Ethan and Clarissa and Joshua for coming to speak today. And I would ask that you all especially give thanks to Toni and Addie and Jacqueline and Taylor and Alex for their efforts today. They will be also bringing their prototypes out into the front space, so you are welcome to ask more questions of them and learn more about their process. But can I please have another round of applause for our students in particular?